Good to see you. I'm great.
Yeah, good. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining. Well, I actually hear that you are based in Colorado, and that is kind of the new Silicon Valley that I've seen all this press about. Is there? Have you been there for a while? Has it been your home, or is that something that's relatively new?
Yeah, I moved here for Visible. So it'll be about 3 years as of this spring. So new home, relatively new home. But I have to say, I haven't really been seeing a lot of it.
Yeah, been back-to-back Zoom calls, I imagine.
Yes.
That's the new normal. Well, thanks so much for joining today. We actually have a mutual friend, Kristen Dolan, that introduced us. So I'm so glad she was able to make that introduction. And the things that we're going to talk today are really in depth and exciting. But I wanted to start off first with exciting news. You guys recently launched a brand new TV commercial, and I would love for Vishal if you guys could play that video for our guests to kind of start this off. Cue the commercial. All right. Well, either way, we'll come back to that when they actually cue the commercial.
Ryan will reenact the commercial for us.
Yes, perfect. Well, let's start off with actually what Visible is. It's an all-digital wireless carrier. You guys don't have stores. You don't have annual contracts. How on earth is this possible?
Well, let me tell you, our business model as Visible, which by the way is a Verizon company. So what's unique about us is that we are a startup within a big Fortune 15 company. So what we're really able to do from an internal perspective to be able to offer this to customers on the outside is to leverage what Verizon already does very well, which is its network, the telecommunications infrastructure, and all of the knowledge and great people who've already built this business up. But what we're doing with Visible is to then build on top of that and think about a slightly different audience set and slightly different business model, which is to say, our inspiration is really a lot of the stuff that people have been doing with a lot of the other industries and categories and product, which is the e-commerce business model. And then from a brand perspective, really carving out a way to have relationships with our members in a way that's more direct to consumer. So the newness of this and then the oldness but goodness of it is what comes together for us to be able to offer what we do as a newest wireless service in the United States, to do everything entirely on a digital business model.
Well, I mean, it sounds like it's the next evolution. So great job on putting this together. I guess you guys say out loud to in the press and on your website, you guys are more than a wireless carrier. Tell us what that means and how your company makes good on that statement.
Yeah, there are kind of a couple of different components to it. One is our aspiration, which is to say, if we exist in the world, we got to add value to people's lives, right? So while there is very much the business purpose of what we saw as the opportunity to be able to, again, marry the best of what is powered by Verizon, and at the same time, the newness of the e-commerce business and direct-to-consumer brand positioning, which frankly in the United States is something very new for this category. We thought about, okay, what are more than just the price point, more than just the product experience, more than just the customer service experience that we can ultimately provide as a total offering, so that the value that people are getting for what they're paying for isn't just that I got a great deal, but it's I got a great deal and I get to do business with a company that really cares about, one, my overall experience, but also some of the other ways in which we've been growing the brand, specifically focus on our place in the world and social impact. So, we can discuss a little bit more about, for example, our Visible Connect program, which has been a way for us to focus our employee time and energy, as well as some funding to support nonprofits who are solving really, really big problems in their communities using mobile technology.
Got it. Well, speaking of technology, I think we finally got the ad up.
Yay!
Yeah, hallelujah. Per what you just said, let's see how that comes across in the TV commercial for your customers. So please play away, Michelle.
Is wireless that doesn't play games. No surprise fees, legit unlimited data for as little as $25 a month. And the best part, it's powered by Verizon. But it gets crazier. Bring a friend every month and get every month for $5.
Which is why I brought them. 2 $5 months right here.
Hey.
Plus the players of my squad. Then finally, my whole live stream. Boom. 12 months of $5 wireless. Visible as little as $25 a month or $5 a month when you bring a friend. Powered by Verizon. Wireless that gets better with friends.
Perfect. Well, Minjae, that is a compelling offer, and also towards a specific demo. How did that, was that something where you guys said, I want to go after gamers, Gen Z? Like, I mean, obviously a lot of people that would apply for a lot of people. It's a great offer.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to be able to share that with all of you. The insight of Visible really was, again, if you go back to kind of the pillars of our business that is new to the wireless category and consumers. So again, e-commerce and direct to consumers. Yes, it does tend to attract younger folks or the next generation of consumers because those use the channels and technologies and the ways in which you would connect as a brand that are newer than more traditional ways of connecting with consumers. Now, what we have then applied that insight ultimately to be able to bring out the positioning where we show up and how we talk to them was less about, we got to really focus on this age group, but it's more about how do you look at what they're comfortable with as digital natives or digital adopters to make this product experience as easy and seamless as it can be for everyone. So does that mean we are attracting largely the next gen of customers? Yes, like our member base tend to be overly skewed towards Gen Z and millennials. But at the same time, we don't necessarily want to like build a wall between them and potentially older folks who are, technologically savvy and they want the simplicity of kind of how we're able to offer our service in the business and be able to open that accessibility up to everyone. So I guess to answer your question, so in creative, aesthetic, and targeting, a lot of the folks that we do kind of go and talk to at the tip of the spear tend to be the next gen consumers. But again, what we're hoping for is that they are frankly, right, like purchase influencers for other people in their lives too, so that we not necessarily be exclusive about who we ultimately serve as our member base.
I love to double click on that. So when we do campaigns, we call it micro segments. So essentially you just show maybe the gamer, millennial, or Gen Z person. Do you guys, with your digital expansion, do you have like techie dads? Do you have different segments that are also kind of hyper specific that you guys are putting out on digital or maybe even back on TV as well?
Yes and no. So I think the challenge is that, right, like we have marketers, is that especially if you think about Visible as the newest entry in the telco category where there are 100 other choices and lots of noise around it, we have to first and foremost get out there and let people know that we exist, so that by the time that they're ready to consider switching phone services, that we're one of the options they will have researched and compared and ultimately be compelled to switch to. But that means it's a broad reach oriented marketing strategy to be able to say, yes, this is good for this design target, but for our message, it has to actually resonate and go as broad as possible for us to have a shot at letting as many people know that we are a good option for them. But then when you also look at the specific messaging or targeting or even channel level strategies, we can become a little bit more nuanced around, okay, so do we then specifically talk to people who do love gaming and be able to talk about more of the next gen technologies around eSIM or 5G and things that they care about, which we recently launched. So it gives us the range of opportunities to be able to say holistically, everything we do together should ladder up to the volume and the reach of people that we be able to introduce ourselves. But at the end of the day, when they see all of the different things that we offer, they be able to see a little bit of like what they're hoping to get out of this that is, again, above and beyond the price point.
I love that. And so we have some CMOs and SVPs in the audience here. I'd love to get your POV when you're looking at, because you're obviously it's a newer brand, you're going out to capture market share. Is there certain metrics? Is it like, I think of like brand lift studies, like there's favorability, there's awareness. Do you have like a monitor watching this all day? How do you guys think about that?
Yes and yes and yes. So I think that also gives us the opportunity to think about, because we got to move fast. We got to move fast and think about what's working, what's not, be able to make decisions that allow us to make more decisions down the road that is based on directional indicators right now versus things that we would, of course, be monitoring as continue to build this business to be able to even have a blip on the brand awareness radar against everybody else. And actually, like, it honestly, for us in year one, yeah, we started to look at the very, very top funnel metrics like awareness and reach. But at the same time, our first job was to make sure that we even show up. Like the level of kind of the spend or the marketing activities that we were doing against everybody else meant that the first step was really to make sure, are you doing the right things to break through? And then for us to be able to then measure from there, okay, the number is moving in the right direction. But, I would say for running this business and more day-to-day operations of like, what are we doing right now that's actually working versus not? There are a lot of more of the day-to-day indicators around the traffic levels to the order and activation conversion rates to where are the traffic coming from? Like, are we actually doing a better job and populating the internet with reviews and content strategy and how other people talk about us versus how we want to get the message out there for people to ultimately be able to find ways to get into our funnel, because visible.com is literally the only storefront that we have. So we got to be able to watch those things and make some calls that are a little bit more real time in the moment versus, I would say, things that take a little bit more time for us to figure out, are we going in the right direction?
And you obviously don't give me any numbers, but in terms of, is it mainly, is it paid social? Is it more programmatic? Obviously it's media mix, but is there any sort of, hey, I think my consumer is more in this kind of channel, or that a certain type of social platform, maybe Pinterest or Instagram or otherwise?
Yeah, so social has played a big role both from an organic and paid perspective for us from the very beginning, because one, it allowed us to get into the communities and conversations in organic ways by partnering with folks who already had the reach and communities out there, as well as also trying to figure out, well, what role does social actually play for us? That feels right to me from the audience perspective and where the opportunities are. But ultimately, I would say we're still very much learning around, is this primarily a way for us to introduce ourselves and people to come in here as the first touch point? Or can these things also be that plus acquisition drivers by the time people actually hear about us more? And so it's, all of the kind of usual suspects of social platforms that we've been on. But I would also say, especially this past year, there have been a lot of disruptions in, right, whether you're a new brand or an old brand, in terms of the context in which people are seeing who you are and what you're selling, as well as the effectiveness of the paid channel. So, we're just trying to roll with the punches and, go with both the gut of what we know that our audience is one and where they are, as well as the metrics that we're seeing more real time to figure out what may have worked us for the first 12 months may not work the same way in the next 12 months, and be able to continue to evolve.
I will say that normally you would think not having a store be a disadvantage, not in the last year. And actually, it's been sure nice not having the overhead, and also people aren't going to spend as much time in there. Obviously, going forward, is the goal to always be direct to consumer, never kind of in stores?
That's the plan. And exactly as you said, Ryan, this past year, I mean, we're right now coming up on almost a year mark, right, in the United States, of having sort of gone into the pandemic phase and shutting everything down, and a lot of the things that being impacted in the retail experience and consumer behavior. And when I look back at that in terms of how our business operated in that moment and where we are now, frankly, there was very little disruption, because from the beginning, our business has been structured in such a way as to allow both internally the business operations and the coordination to be as virtual and digital as possible, even when we did have a physical office here in Denver. But at the same time, the business model in itself was already there. And so our challenge previous to COVID and the pandemic and related things had been primarily around, we got to, again, let people know that we exist. And frankly, again, in this industry, even though e-commerce sales had exploded even last year, going up 44% in the United States, the mentality and the behavior in the wireless service, and when people think about your phone service, buying this online and doing it is more of an early adopter behavior, I would say. So the behavior change that we were doing at the same time as building up this business got accelerated. So, all in all, we've been ready for it, and we've been able to kind of take stock and keep going with the trend that's been here. And so we're excited about how to keep building on that. But what I will say also is, from a marketing standpoint, being all virtual and digital doesn't mean that we won't experiment with a lot of the different touch points that are out there. So I'll just bring up like one example. Kirsty on our team has recently done our first direct mail campaign, and people will say, why in the world are you doing direct mail as a digital business? But to me, this isn't necessarily about, because we're a digital business, our funnel is entirely digital and we will never touch things that are non-digital. But it's really about, even as traditional and old school as a medium as a direct mail campaign can be, but what would you do to reinvent how you say what you say, what funnel you would actually create from a piece of mail to visible.com. And frankly, these days, yeah, like people do get some spam in the direct mail, but I would venture to say you might get more spam in your email inbox than your actual physical inbox. So we just wanted to see what happened. So it just literally went out a couple of weeks ago. I'm starting to hear from some friends who got it. But that's kind of an example of the kinds of things that we will continue to strive to uncover, do differently, even if it may not necessarily make sense logically, as why are you, as a direct to consumer digital only brand, experimenting in these types of channels?
Yeah, we should never sleep on direct mail. My mom still sends me those Best Buy coupons like
There you
monthly,
go.
so it works. No, so it's yeah, every single I even see potential stuff when things open back up. I'm sure there's going to be, experiential integrations, hopefully back in, if a South by Southwest comes back around, or a Coachella, you guys obviously are perfectly fit for those audiences. So, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun stuff you guys can do in the next few years.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Cool. Well, I want to switch gears a bit. So you mentioned briefly a moment ago around kind of the work from home experience. And,
yeah,
this is the question we've asked for the last 8 months, 9 months of these series to all the CMOs and CEOs is, all right, Tom Hanks gets sick. A moment happens where the world knows that this is real. For the next, 2 to 4 weeks, are you just, is it everyone all hands on deck? Is it basically you putting together like how to work remotely? Is everyone in Colorado? How are you basically controlling the ship from the very beginning?
Yeah. One of the traits that I see in our business, especially at all leadership levels, is back to kind of the rolling with the punches spirit of how we're building a new business from ground up. The worst thing that you can do in any situation is to be indecisive, like not make a decision and become paralyzed by the context and paralyzed by what is or isn't there. And so even kind of this moment that we were all experiencing a year ago, we did not have all the information. We did not necessarily know how it was going to be 3 months, 6 months, or a year down the road. But in the moment, with the information that we did have at the time, so March 11th, we just had to move, like, again, so that we can continue to make decisions down the road. Like, I think about the ultimately kind of the roadmap of a startup as like choose your own adventure. The number one goal is to give yourselves the optionality to keep making choices. Some of them might be bad choices, and some of them you might fail, and some of them just might not go anywhere, but it's really important that you keep moving. So if you take that kind of a mentality into the decision of like working from home and having sent everybody home, that was absolutely the right thing to do, versus us saying, well, some of you have a choice, and maybe we'll see what happens. And it was hard, right? Especially for, like, there are people on my team who are brimming inside their house with like 4 kids and 2 dogs and 2 adults, both of whom are working from home. And so I knew that it wasn't necessarily the easiest decision either to have made something like that of a call in the 24 hours. And then now we're packing up and we may never come back, or at least for like the year. But it was the team really rallied around kind of at least having a decision, and to be able to then figure out like, okay, so then what decisions do I need to make as an employee or a husband or a wife or a mother, and to be able to deal with some of the other things they were frankly, right, having to decide. Once we then started to work from home, that gave us then the opportunity to then think about, okay, well, it looks like it's going to go on for a while. So do we wait again, or do we try to think about what opportunity does this crisis moment actually give us to get ahead of the waiting period? And so it was, again, from a leadership perspective, I would say, thinking more from the like, oh my God, all of these things are happening and I'm a victim of this situation, to what can we actually do in this moment to think about what the good things that we can make happen because of this opportunity. So some of the things that, you know, initially happened were things like being able to support folks with some of the childcare, you know, costs and things like that that happened. And now we're at a phase where we are, by the way, fully now remote, no matter what. Like even after we all get vaccinated, we will no longer have like a dedicated desk space for everybody in the physical office. So that has allowed for people to be able to then hunker down in the meantime closer to their family or other places that they can work from. And as a business, we're now able to think a little bit more strategically about how do we support our employees with things that used to be maybe more of a perk, but is actually an essential part of how they're able to carve out the workspace in their lives. And, you know, just the last thing I'll say around this is like, I think we all learned how many of the rules around workplaces were actually not that important. You know, like whether it's the specific hours that you have to sit at your desk or the kinds of meetings that were essential versus not, and hoping that some of those really drastic nature of how we've had to work and live and everything all at the same time in the same space, I hope that the best of the insights and the behavior will stick for us as Visible, but frankly, like everyone, as to, man, we really can work differently and be able to come out of this with the positive side of what happened and really take stock of the things that perhaps we didn't necessarily were forced to take a look at.
Well, it seems very, it's a great point. So I find it, so we have about 130 people in our company. It's not obviously as big as you guys, but it seems antithetical, but being virtual and seeing people's backgrounds and their dogs and their kids and their houses, I've actually been able to have more FaceTime with more people, as opposed to I walk through halls and you say hi to people, but everyone's in their business attire and their business mode. So have you made some kind of deeper relationships with some of the people that are in your company based off of virtual?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely put the responsibility back on all of us to make the effort where it counts and make that count, whether it is one-on-one conversations or a regular type of like, let's not talk about work, but you know, it's more of a team happy hour, like that kind of stuff. And I have seen a lot more vulnerabilities around the organizations in moments where, again, like we are dealing with like so many layers of life. And so it's really difficult to compartmentalize all of that and not bring that. So that there, I would say there was a bit more of that humanness of how we all show up at work. But it does take, I think, different kind of paying attention as colleagues and leaders of the business, because you can't necessarily always read people's cues, and maybe you would have a video off someday and whatever. But you know what I saw, at least, you know, anecdotally, is that the beginning of the pandemic phase, this hit the people who are living alone in small spaces hardest. because in some ways work was kind of their outlet and be able to connect with other people. And for them, the physical space of kitchen and office and bedroom, like everything is all in one space. And so it was super hard on them from a mental health perspective. And then you started to get layered on the partners and caretakers in 2 to 3 months phases after that, where now it's like, oh my God, like I don't see an end in sight, and this is just going on and on. I've got kids and dogs and everybody hanging off of me, and I have to be like 5 different people at the same time in one person. So I don't think there's necessarily like we're not all moving at the same time, and we're not all moving through the same kinds of things, good or bad. So I don't have the perfect or right answer around this, but I do think that just means that we as leaders of the companies also have to be that much more purposeful about how we show up and set the bar, like in emotion and everything, but also where and how we listen.
I love that. And you use the word purpose and purposeful. And it reminds me, so kind of segue into the next thing I want to talk about. So one of the kind of moments in my life that I was most proud of myself and the company is that we partnered with Rock the Vote. And while it wasn't, it was a mix. It's not obviously political in the sense that everyone should vote, but it's not political in nature. But the main tenets of it are equality, community, getting everybody a chance to put their voice out. I'd love to hear about you guys. I know you guys did some great stuff. I think $1 million grant for your social justice and equality. I mean, for those that are listening, I'd love to hear what you actually put into motion and what you've done with that so far.
Yeah, so I'll talk about something that is part of our company DNA, always on, and then sort of how we also built on top of that to decide to show up in specific moments throughout last year. So I mentioned the Visible Connect program a little bit earlier in our conversation, and that's our social good accelerator program. And the fun fact about our business is that we actually started the social good accelerator before we even had the first paying customer. So it was very important to the business in terms of, one, looking at the customer insights and how do we ultimately differentiate ourselves from, again, more than the dollars and cents and the deals perspective, and how much we saw that people cared about wanting to align their dollars with businesses whose values also are aligned with theirs. Mm-hmm. And so the purpose of Visible Connect is ultimately for us to be able to provide funding, but also time and resources and expertise to nonprofit entrepreneurs who are trying to solve some sort of issues or problems in their communities. So it ranges anything from food shortage in urban areas to survivors of domestic violence just coming out of relationships and having to restart their lives, to all sorts of education, like from K through to 12, and how do you support for them in virtual and digital resources. So it runs a gamut. And the reason that we didn't necessarily specifically focus on one social issue, for example, is we are ultimately a platform, just the way that our service works for people, right? It's the invisible product that fuels your visible phone. Mm-hmm. And so even in this program, we wanted to be the platform that fuels what people already know well themselves, these entrepreneurs. They know their communities, they know their constituents, they know the issues that they're trying to solve for. So instead of us trying to put our spin or point of view on that, our job is to amplify it. So even the kinds of organizations that we work with come in at very specific stages of their funding or development, and they have very specific challenges as newer nonprofits, so that we can figure out, is it money, is it expertise, what is it that they need to be able to ultimately get their businesses and therefore their impact in their communities to the next level. So that's kind of like Visible Connect. We're in year 3 and really excited to now actually roll this program out, all virtual also. But last year, just around the Black Lives Matter and the murder of George Floyd, and I think as a woman of color and an immigrant to this country too, for me, those moments are important. And then we did take a stance, like the donation that you mentioned, and on top of Visible Connect programs, like identifying organizations that have already been doing this work, like Reform Alliance, and providing support for them in that moment. It was important for us to say something and show up with the commitment. But what I think about a lot more is the everyday behavior and commitment. So you may not necessarily go out and talk about this all the time, nor should you. Like, there are moments in which the amplification of the message and the platform is important, but also, frankly, as a relatively new business, we don't have the biggest microphone or the megaphone. So what is it that we can do, similar to the way in which we went to market with the social good program first and then started to sell something? I'd like to think about this as, what is it that we can do more at the everyday commitment that we can make to each other as employees and colleagues of this business, but also to our members and so forth, to be able to make that build up over time and that effort be sticky and lasting and resilient. Because even taking social justice and race issue as one, like, it's a lived experience for people every single day. It's not the kind of thing that can just go away by companies taking a big stance one time and moving on.
Mm-hmm. Wait, the ethos of a company is not only obviously for the external piece, but your biggest advocates are your employees. If they are outwardly telling their family and their friends, this place speaks to me, I believe in it, you should use my service, the service, help support me. I mean, that in itself. So you guys are obviously, and we've seen it ourselves. I mean, when we pick out things that are across the board, it either speaks to certain groups, or it's just across for the sake of rock the vote for just people having a chance to vote. The everyday kind of mundane tasks kind of become part of this larger narrative of like, but you're helping something larger. You're helping, like, you guys have that $1 million plus grant, but you guys are doing this every day. This is causing a ripple effect. So kudos to you.
Thank you. And, I'm hoping also that the everyday nature of our product and service is also another way that we can continue to help people. And that's a key part of how my team and I think about the marketing strategy of Visible, which is that I think previously the choices between the things that were perhaps lower price versus higher price in this category were distinctly marketed. Like, it divides people into those who have money and people who don't, and therefore you can afford to have these things or not, and the quality of experience goes up and down depending on the value of what you're paying for. Whereas our member base, there are people who can outright buy $1,000 latest phones, but they still choose to bring that phone over here because they see the value of kind of what they're paying for and this is what they need, as well as folks who are really worried about paying for this bill versus something else another month. But I'm hoping that the way in which we can appeal to this spectrum of members and consumers not feel ever like we're talking down to people. Like, people shouldn't be reminded of the reasons of why you may have to make different choices socioeconomically, but our role again is to offer the best possible options so that they don't have to worry about at least this part of it and be able to do other things that can make their lives better.
I love it. And actually, it's a good segue into the party pay. So one of your guys, the product you guys do for referrals, I've heard for years, like, your family plan. But it's not, from what I can tell from you guys, it's really about, no, go to your friends, go outside of your network. And every time you do so, you get the monthly billing. Is it low as $25?
Yeah, so let me explain that a little bit. So yeah, we are one plan business. We only have like a single line that you sign up for. So let's say Ryan have signed up for Visible and you start at a $40 price. What's beautiful about the $40 price, and I have never geeked out so much on a price point and a pricing strategy, but our team worked so hard months leading up to the launch to make that price literally $40 for every single person with taxes and fees included. And as you know, like in every single state, the tax laws are different. So we had to go do the hard work to make sure that it is consistently $40 every single month for everybody. So that's step one. The step two that we took is what you mentioned as party pay. So when we started to think about what is the dynamic of family plan, why do people join these group plans, and who are even on family plans? And so primarily the motivation was the ability to bring your bills down lower. But secondarily, we talked to a whole lot of folks who were not family and they were utilizing the traditional family plan construct to ultimately, hack their way to savings, which is super smart. But it was just so like funny and touching and hilarious, like all at once, because we talked to people who used to date each other and they don't want to do anything to do with each other anymore except for their phone bill because it's cheaper, so you spend more money. Or like even in like in-law dynamic, like got divorced, but I'm still on my in-laws phone plan. So it just took a lot of different relationship circuses for people to figure this out. But when, right before again COVID, like when we looked at the insights, like we were getting into cars with strangers to save money, right? Getting into Ubers and Lyfts. So people's willingness to partake in the sharing economy and therefore how you find value in this was prevalent. So we decided, you know what, let's give people the ability to save more money by being on our plan, but let's listen to them and appeal specifically people who don't necessarily are, related and who want to utilize this in a different way. So our party plan allows you to, so Minjae and Ryan are on visible single lines. We link our accounts. We do not share our unlimited data. We do not share any account information, and still be able to then bring our bill down by $5. So now we're paying from 40 to 35, and then we join other people here. So up to 4 people in a party, it goes down to $25 a month.
That's great.
So the third version of this that we just recently launched 2 weeks ago with this new creative is we first unlimited the cap on the party size. So that's just kind of trying to see what's the social behavior around parties, because on Facebook and Reddit right now, we have like groups of 30,000 people who are visible members sharing tips and tricks. And sometimes they even come to like our defense first if we don't get something right. And a lot of community conversation and advocacy happening. So we wanted to tap into that behavior and mentality and be able to offer people maybe a different way to connect with each other. So, we have like right now parties that are dozens and more that are like 50 and up around, because you can name your party too. Like we can have an influential party, we can have a like Colorado party. Yes, so it's kind of tapping into that behavior around, oh, not only do I get to save money, but now actually maybe join this thing, and then we become more of an affinity group. So that's the latest iteration of Party Pay. And on top of that, we've also rolled out the referrals program, which is what you just saw in the gamer creative. So once you're a member, you can refer somebody. And so Ryan's going to now bring in Chris. And every person that you bring in, for the Chris credit, your bill the next month goes down to $5. So you could essentially like bring in 12 people, right, for the month. And then your annual phone bill becomes $60.
Well, that's very compelling. And I first off, I'm so influential is now going to be on the visible plan, so that's perfect. But I'd be remiss if I don't bring up about 6 minutes left. 5G. Everyone for the last year and a half, 2 years, but so 5G specifically, and also you guys launched, which from what I understand, it's pretty massive news. The eSIM support, the fact that you can do a virtual, essentially eSIM card or e-card. Please tell the people about why this is a game changer and why this should hopefully make this party as big as possible.
Yeah. So 5G, I think there's a lot of messages out there, and I'm certainly not the foremost expert in this. So I'm going to say a little bit about that and then talk more about the eSIM part of it. 5G is right, the next generation of the experience that carriers can offer. So us being a part of the Verizon ecosystem, and the benefit of that to you as a consumer is that now we can also offer that experience to you with our plan all included. So it's been really exciting to see, especially a lot of our early adopter members who've been with us from the very beginning and always on the hunt for what's next, to start to experience that in some of the latest generation phones on iOS and Android ecosystem, to really see what this means to them. So we're excited to continue to expand the portfolio of phones that are compatible with 5G powered by Verizon, and be able to see what people are going to be ultimately seeing as the benefit for them. For eSIM, that's kind of the, I think, hidden gem of the latest innovation in wireless. So to kind of explain it the way that our engineers explain it to me is it's right now, if you buy a phone and you sign up for a new phone service, you either have to do one of two things. The phone itself comes with the little SIM card inside your phone that again enables your connection to the network and be able to make phone calls and all that good stuff. In our case, for Visible, when you order and start a service with us, whether you're bringing your own phone or you're getting a new phone, we give you a Visible specific SIM card so that you can start your experience by being connected to our network using that SIM card piece. So our SIM card and the next day shipping, all of that has brought us one step closer to how consumers can from their own house activate and start using the phone service instead of going into stores, right? eSIM is like the next version of it. So the phones that are now compatible with eSIM, and in some cases dual SIMs, dual SIM means you can use a physical SIM as well as the eSIM experience. So you don't even need that physical SIM card shipped from us to you, but from your phone, you can actually connect to the network and switch phone services in like less than 15 minutes. And the equivalent of how I think about this experience is a lot of the OTT and like smart TV experience these days, right? Because with more of the traditional cable services, you would have to make an appointment and you wait for somebody to come to your house in a specific window, hopefully the window that they said they would come. And then they have to do some physical things to connect your service, your TV, to the cable service. And so there's a bit of a waiting period and there's a bit more of the work that needs to be done that you as a consumer cannot necessarily do yourself. Whereas YouTube TV, which is one of the last products that I worked at in my previous job, with the connection of YouTube TV app on a smart TV, you can actually like realize, oh my God, like I have to watch that game tonight and I don't have that channel. Turn it on, activate, and you can start watching it right away. So in my mind, the eSIM experience can very much be what is already happening in the cable industry, and the direct connection and the interruption of the middle process for consumers to be able to ultimately get what they need instantly and seamlessly.
I love that. And getting that message out is actually, we have about 2 minutes left, so I think it's probably the last question. You coming from YouTube, you want to get this message out to people. And I'm obviously a vested interest in this. Influencers are obviously top of everybody's tongue. You guys partner with Amanda Klutz and Matt King. Why them, and how does that fit into your strategy of getting like the eSIM and 5G messaging out?
Yeah, so when you look at the kind of traditional landscape of how telco industry have utilized other people to ultimately tell more people about your thing, it's largely been in the tech reviewer type of space, with many of whom we have relationships also, and they're an incredibly important part of our ecosystem. And what we wanted to accomplish by partnering with Amanda and Matt, and we have a long kind of list of influencers that we partner with by channels like the platforms, as well as by their communities of passion. And the reason that we decided to do that, and that's been actually the beginning of our very foundational strategy when we first launched as an invite-only service, is there's nothing like being able to earn your right, especially as a new brand, to be able to talk to people who don't already know about you and be able to tap into their conversations in ways that are organic. So whether, again, if it's Amanda or Matt, and that we actually have some exciting other partnerships coming down the road, Laverne Cox, Scottie Pippen, etc. And the way in which, first of all, we wanted to show up was, okay, again, our name is visible, our product is invisible, so how many different ways can we actually show up that is visually creative, compelling? And so that allowed us to tap into arts and crafts communities, to food blogs, and just many, many, many different ways in which we Visible showed up as Rice Krispie Treats or the Arts and Crafts Project. And that gave us, again, the permission to be seen and talked about in ways that were not just one dimensional, but in many different ways, and therefore reaching our objective of expand the reach and the audience that you're able to talk to. And then the second part is that ongoing engagement. So there's some influencers that we have worked with in the past who on their own like reposted some of the stuff that we created with them, because one of the key lessons that I've learned as a marketer at YouTube is that there's no one who does this better than them, right? Like they know their platform, they know their audience, they know what they're passionate about and how this works. So our approach as a brand when we work with any influencers, frankly, is be really specific and clear about the few things that are non-negotiables of our business, which are, this is who we are, this is what we sell, and this is how it works. The rest of it is up to them. Like how, if it's a video, if it's a photo, how many times or how it shows up, what color, like doesn't matter. They know how to do that best. So the creative brief is do what you do best